Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's wrap up week 28 with Silmarillion Saturday. Now, these Saturdays are our chance to revisit the history and legends of the Elder Days, whether from the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, or more. Now, last time we saw the moon first rise as Fingolfin arrived in Middle-earth, such a dramatic moment, and we learned about Arien and Tilion, the Maiar chosen to bear the vessels of the sun and moon, respectively, through the skies. Let's now pick up with Tilion and his earliest travels. Tilion had traversed the heavens 7 times, and thus was in the furthest east, when the vessel of Arien was made ready. Then Anor arose in glory, and the first dawn of the sun was like a great fire upon the towers of the Pelori. The clouds of Middle-earth were kindled, and there was heard the sound of many waterfalls. Then indeed Morgoth was dismayed, and he descended into the uttermost depths of Angband, and withdrew his servants, sending forth great reek and dark cloud, to hide his land from the light of the day star. Now Varda purposed that the 2 vessels should journey in Ilmen and ever be aloft, but not together. Each should pass from Valinor into the east and return, the one issuing from the west as the other turned from the east. Thus the first of the new days were reckoned after the manner of the trees, from the mingling of the lights when Arien and Tilion passed in their courses above the middle of the earth. But Tilion was wayward and uncertain in speed, and held not to his appointed path, and he sought to come near to Arien, being drawn by her splendor, though the flame of Anar scorched him, and the island of the moon was darkened. Because of the waywardness of Tilion, therefore, and yet more because of the prayers of Lorien and Este, who said that sleep and rest had been banished from the earth, and the stars were hidden, Varda changed her counsel, and allowed a time wherein the world should still have shadow and half-light. Anar rested therefore a while in Valinor, lying upon the cool bosom of the outer sea, and evening, the time of the descent and resting of the sun, was the hour of greatest light and joy in Aman. But soon the sun was drawn down by the servants of Ulmo, and went then in haste under the earth, and so came unseen to the east, and there mounted the heaven again, lest night be overlong, and evil walk under the moon. But by Anar the waters of the outer sea were made hot, and glowed with colored fire, and Valinor had light for a while after the passing of Arien. Yet as she journeyed under the earth and drew towards the east, the glow faded, and Valinor was dim, and the Valar mourned then most for the death of Laurelin. At dawn, the shadows of the mountains of defense lay heavy on the blessed realm. Varda commanded the moon to journey in like manner, and, passing under earth, to arise in the east, but only after the sun had descended from heaven. But Tilion went with uncertain pace, as yet he goes, and was still drawn towards Arien, as he shall ever be, so that often both may be seen above the earth together, or at times it will chance that he comes so nigh that his shadow cuts off her brightness, and there is a darkness amid the day. Therefore, by the coming and going of Anar, the Valar reckoned the days thereafter until the change of the world. For Tilion tarried seldom in Valinor, but more often would pass swiftly over the western land, over Avathar or Araman or Valinor, and plunge in the chasm beyond the outer sea, pursuing his way alone amid the grots and caverns at the roots of Arda. There he would often wander long, and late would return. I love that phrase early on. The first dawn of the sun was like a great fire upon the towers of the Pelori. The clouds of Middle-earth were kindled, and there was heard the sound of many waterfalls. The clouds had been kindled. At first I was thinking that's like they're lit up on fire, like, oh, now we have the sun coming off the clouds. But the more I think about it, the more I think that maybe it's more like because the sun has finally arrived, clouds are kindled, clouds come into existence, they get started. Because earlier there's no sun to evaporate the water, no water vapor, no clouds. I may be totally wrong, but that's the way I'm thinking it. Now that also meant, though, that until now there had always been clear nights to see the stars of Varda. That's why the star's absence is mentioned. But also with the arrival of the sun, we get the melting of ice and snow, and waterfalls begin. That much we know for sure only started with the arrival of the sun. And that makes me think of Yosemite Valley and watching all the falls return in spring as the snow begins to melt. Now, Later, we get this idea of the sun and moon traveling west to east and then returning to go east to west, crossing paths in the middle. This was to duplicate the perpetual light of the trees with the mingling of the lights, the waning and waxing, etc. But that would mean no night at all. No night gives you no sleep, gives you no rest, gives you no more visible stars. So Lorien, who's in charge of dreams, and Este, who's in charge of rest, changed the mind of Varda. And now the sun rests in Valinor a while and then goes under the earth back to the east to rise in the morning. Now we also get details that would account for the seemingly inconsistent movement of the moon in relation to the sun, as well as a mention of eclipses. Of course, there's a lot more here to discuss, but for now, folks, that does it for this week's Silmarillion Saturday. Thank you for joining me. And join me next week as we conclude the chapter after seeing Morgoth's reaction to these new lights. Now, please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, and a bonus weekly episode and more. Folks, if you're watching this on YouTube, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, turn on your notifications. If you're on a podcast app, be sure to follow or subscribe. And everybody, follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.